Okay, today's lesson is on functions in HTML. So before we get started, we should discuss important concepts. So there are static websites, which are websites without JavaScript, and um, there's another thing about static websites, they don't change when you interact with them. So um, that's why you need JavaScript to make dynamic websites because if they don't change, then they're static. So two examples of static websites are blogs and infographics. Blogs are usually just websites that you scroll. You don't really click on things, and there's usually no interactions. And infographics, same thing. You just kind of scroll on the page, um, and you can go to other pages, but there's no other interaction. That's not to say that these two websites don't have JavaScript. They probably do have a little bit, um, but they're not to the extent that you would call them dynamic websites. Yeah, they're mostly text-based too, because text is kind of the main thing that static websites provide. Okay, if you add JavaScript to web pages, then it makes them dynamic. Dynamic websites change and respond to user input, and that allows for interactivity and data storage. Here's some examples of dynamic websites. They change and respond. So, for example, CodeHS, if you input some code and you click the run button, it's going to change the output. Um, and also with Google, if you enter in a different search query, you're going to get different results. And then data storage, you have a whole list of CodeHS sandboxes, and they all store whatever your code was. Um, and Google, it has a lot of storage on your uh, on Google Drive and some of its other services. So both of these websites are dynamic. And also, you can see here, they can change based on your preferences. For example, Google can have a username and password. Um, Imagine you sign into a different account, you're going to get a whole different slew of data, and that's a sign that you're on a dynamic website. Okay, to make our websites more dynamic, or actually no, we've already made websites dynamic by using JavaScript. For example, the demo where you prompt in whatever you whatever your name is, and then it shows that up on the screen in HTML. That is an example of dynamic websites, but there's a lot more you could do. Yeah, adding or changing a footnote, like we've learned, isn't that practical. We can increase the usability of our websites with functions. You guys already know about functions. They're blocks of code, and they look like this in your JavaScript code. So you have your function, keyword, and then your name, and then your code. And then you also have parameters. We've already learned about this. Parameters are inputs into your functions, and they can be used as variables inside of your function. Okay, functions can be reused to make code more efficient and easier to read. So here you can see, instead of writing all of this code, you say variable p equals this document.create element, and then you append it. Instead of doing that, you could just do add paragraph, and that makes it really clear to the developer that this function adds a paragraph, and that's all that that line does. You haven't learned about create element yet and append child, but I can kind of give you a quick overview. So document.create element is a function that makes like a node in your DOM tree, but it doesn't know where to attach it, so it just attaches it to the side. Actually, just it just leaves it to the side. So then the HTML remains the exact same. So you don't really see the elements. And then if you do document.body.append child, what you're doing is you're appending that node to the side into the body. So then the user can't see it. So basically, you're just creating an element and then showing it to the screen. Okay, you can use parameters inside of your functions. We're going to practice creating functions using buttons. The button tag allows us to create buttons on a web page, but you'll see if you click this, it does nothing. Since buttons are usually generally used to execute a task, they're perfect for learning about functions, because functions are for executing tasks. Okay, we can add functions to a button using events. So events trigger actions on the browser. These events are often set to a function call. basically they just run functions. On click. So this is an attribute for the button. And this attribute, it executes whatever function is inside of the on click attribute whenever you click the specific element. And usually the element is a button because that just makes more sense. We can add an event to a button by adding it as an attribute in the opening tag. So here you can see you're making a new attribute called onClick onto the button, and you're setting it to my function. So whenever you click the button, it's going to run my function. Hmm. So this is a problem. This is the problem that we're going to solve. You're going to try to change the color of a paragraph whenever you click a button. Okay, so we definitely need a paragraph, and we're going to give the paragraph an ID so we can select it inside of our JavaScript. Okay, here's the steps that we're going to use. We're going to first create a button, then we're going to create an on-click event and attach it to the button, and then we're going to write a function that changes the text color. So you find the p tag, probably using the ID, and then you set the attribute to red. You're going to learn about set attributes and other functions. So here, you're making a button on the page. You're giving it an on-click event, and then you can see here we're giving this a function. And then we can also write a function to change its text color. So we need a script tag, and we need to write a function, and the function's name should be the same as the name in the onClick event, so that when you click the button, it runs this function. Okay, so here's how you would set the paragraph to red. You would first um, create an element, or actually get the element from the screen or from the DOM, and then you would set it to be called this variable, so p. We would also use the let keyword instead of the var. And then here you could see we're getting the style attribute of the p tag, and then we're getting the color of the style. So um, we'll talk about this later in our example. So here you can see when you run the code and you click me, it changes the paragraph to red. So it runs this function, and this function is supposed to return the paragraph to red. Okay, we can also add events to elements we create using the add event listener function. So this is what the syntax is. You get your element here, and dot add event listener. It's a function of the element. So most elements have this function called add event listener, and all the HTML elements they do. So you're just going to put this after. You're going to put your parameters, which is going to be your events and your function. So here is what it's going to look like. Your click is an event. It's in strings. It's in quotes because it's a string. And your functions turn red. You don't put quotes here, and that's because if you put quotes here, it's going to run the function, and you don't want that happening before you click the button. So if you don't put quotes here, it's only gonna run when you click the button. Okay. You can see these two lines are the exact same. So you can give an on-click attribute to the button, or you can attach an event listener with the attribute of click. So when you say click, you basically say on whenever you click the button, then you run this function. You can also change this to hover. So whenever you hover over the element, um, it turns red. And there's a lot of other things you can use for this. I forgot what it's called. It's called an event. Let's actually take a look at the W3 Schools page for this. Um, okay, yeah. So here you can see they're using click. Um, okay, here's the list. So there's abort, afterprint, blur, click right here, drag, focus. So focus would be like your CSS focus, right? So whenever you click on it, then it runs the function, and then when you click out, it's going to stop running the function. There's input, and then you can look at this page. It's a lot. Okay. These events are string values. Yeah, so this on click um, means you have to put click here, and the functions are not. So you can see you put function in string here because it's not HTML, but here you don't put the function in strings because it is JavaScript. And then, um, okay, you can also write functions directly into inside of this event listener function. So here you can see you're making a function. Parentheses are empty, which means there's no parameters, and you don't put a name here because um, it's called an empty function because you're just making a function put inside of this event listener. This is a little bit more advanced. Um, I recommend that you make a separate function and then you just attach the function like we did here, because it makes it easier to read. You can see that this turns it red. Here you can't even see that. It just says the code, and then you have to figure out what it does by itself. Yeah, there's no name. And then you close everything in brackets if you're doing this method. Yeah, if you don't intend to use the function, so you're only going to make this function once, then I guess you could use it because there's no need to make an entire function for something you're only going to use once in your code. Um, so yeah, you can use this then. So let's try this out. I'm going to also use the second type just to show you guys. So we're on our HTML page. You're going to make, okay, this code is called boilerplate because you need it for every time you make your HTML projects. That's just some language that we use. Okay, once you have your boilerplate code, you're going to put your paragraph that you want to change, right? And then let's give it the same thing they had. And then the ID, I'm gonna give it ID of change. Okay, we're gonna make a variable for this paragraph. So every time that you want to change something in your JavaScript, you're gonna have to first select it in your JavaScript. So let's select this using document.get ID. Then the IDs change. And then okay, so you have this element on the page, it's black. What we can do is we can give it an event listener. So we do b dot add event listener. I'm gonna name it something else. I don't know. Okay, and then let's use click for our first example. Okay, so what you're doing here is you're finding the style property, right? So you're doing pair.style, which is basically like you going inside of your element and you're going to the style and then you're setting it. And then here you can go pair.style is equal to color red, right? Because in your style attribute you would go like this. So you're basically just setting this. But in JavaScript, there's something neat you can do, which is you do dot color. So you're finding a specific attribute, and then you can set that. So then you don't have to do this. You could just do dot color is equal to red. So it's the same thing here. And the advantage of this is now imagine you have two attributes here. Like this paragraph already has an attribute of background color, right? When you're doing style equals color red, you're basically resetting this entire property to color red, so then it would remove the background. So let's just try this out. So if we didn't have this, or actually let's first um, put the function in the event listener. I'm also not going to do anything. Okay, so if it has a background green, then the style property is background green, right? And then when you click the button, we also don't have a button. Okay, let's also make a button. I'm going to use get elements by tag name. I'm going to get the button, and then I'm going to get the first element in the list. So we're going to attach the event listener to the button now. So whenever you click the button, then it changes the color. So here you can see what it does is it overrides this style property and it sets it to color red. So it basically takes off this background green, which we don't want. Because you want your previous styles to be changed, so you only want the color of the text to change. So instead, you can set its color property specifically. So then its background stay the same, but then its color changes. So then you're not really affecting the other styles. I'll make this more readable. There. Okay. I want to change font size instead. It's just a better property because right now the red over the side looks bad. You notice how in JavaScript you can't use dashes when you're using variable names. It's the same thing for attributes. Attributes can't be dashes. So you would use font size here, but you can't use font size in JavaScript. And JavaScript font size is like this. It's camel case. So whenever you're using attributes, make sure to use camel case. And then also red doesn't make sense. We have to change this to a pixel value. So 50 pixels. There, it gets bigger. Okay, now let's say I want to click it. I want to make it so it toggles. So you click it, it changes back to 10 pixels. So we could do that by in your function. Actually, let's use a new property or a new variable. We'll call it is big. And initially we'll start with false because whenever you first refresh the page, it's false. It's not big. Then if is big is true, then you want to set its font size to small. Right, so if it's already changed, you want to set it to small and you want to set is big to false, just like it is here. And then else if it's small, then you want to set its font size to something bigger and then set is big to true. So this will basically make a toggle where you can click it, gets bigger and smaller, and it toggles back and forth. You'll notice at the beginning, there's like the first state, and then you click it, and then it sets it to this. So to fix that, you would basically just say in the start, I want its font size to be 20. So it starts at 20, and then um, it goes to big. Let's just make this. Oh, I made it a string. That's awesome. There, now it gets big in one click. So I'm gonna change this to an hover effect because click just seems like a lot of work. You have to like track where it is. So let's do on hover. So now whenever you hover over it, it's gonna run this function. Let's go back. I don't think I did it right. Okay, it's called mouse over. So mouse over is hover inside of JavaScript. There. So now whenever you hover over it, it gets bigger and smaller. Okay. Let's try not using event listener. So instead we can do button dot on click, or not even in your JavaScript, you can do this in your HTML. So in your HTML, let's say on click, and then I want to run the function turn red. So here when you click it, it turns red. You can also do on hover, and that's just gonna do same thing, but it's whenever you hover over it. No, I think you have to do on mouse over there. So whenever you put your mouse over the element, it's going to change. Okay, and then the final thing, um, let's say I only want to use this function once, or I only need to use this function for my button. So I need to make an entire function called turn red and write all this function here. I can basically define my function inside of my event listener. So you do this by typing in the function keyword, your parentheses, open bracket, close bracket, and then inside of here is where you put your function. So I'm just going to copy the same exact code. You won't need the function anymore. And then remember, you can't access the isBig variable here because it's being defined down here. So let's just bring this all the way up here. Okay. So now you define your function inside of the event listener. So it still works, um, but you don't have to write all that code. Okay. What else did we learn? Okay, I think that's everything that you need for your homework. Your homework is going to be this one, functions in HTML 5.5. And then you should be able to do all of these, especially the last one because we learned about style this lesson. And there's also this, someone's asking about 5.2.10. Is that the last one? Okay, yeah. On 5.5, you might need some help with random number generator. Just ask in the Discord if you can't figure that out. Um, so here you can see it gives you 5 paragraphs. Or if you already did this, you can leave. Um, that's all for us. Okay, you can see there's 5 paragraphs. And then you can also see that you need to use inner HTML.link. So what you do is do hmm, I don't know how everyone else did this because you need to use a loop for this. But we learned about loops, so it's fine. So you have a variable, and this is really common. It's when you're trying to find the maximum number out of a list of numbers. You first have your maximum number, and you're going to set this to 0. And the reason for that is you want your maximum number um, to override this, basically. And then you're going to make a for loop, and then for let I equals 0. So it's start from 0. I is less than 5 because there's 5 paragraphs, and you want it to get to you want to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want it to go all the way up to 4, I plus plus. And then you also need to get your paragraph elements. So you say paragraphs equals document dot get elements by tag name, and then tag name is going to be P. So notice how whenever you try to get an element, you have to use these brackets and then put your index in here. But each of these I's, it kind of corresponds to an index. So you just put your I in here, and it'll do the same thing. So it'll go from 0 all the way up to 4. And then what you have to do now is basically override the max. So if, let's console it all up, it's just zero data. Check for any errors, right? Because you don't want to code the entire thing and then you realize there's an error and you can't find it. Um, okay, and the console's empty. So what you do is do dot inner HTML dot length, right? That's how you get your length of the paragraph. And then when you refresh this, you're going to see a list of all the lengths of the paragraphs. So what you want to do is whenever your list or whenever your number is greater than the max, you want to set the max to the variable or to the number. So let me just show you guys what it looks like. If max is smaller than um, this number, another neat thing you can do is make this a variable just so it's easier to type. There. So now I don't have to type this entire thing. I can just use current. So we console log current. And then if max is less than current, you're going to set max to current. And then at the end, let's just console log the max. Right? So if max is going to start off 0, the current is going to be 320. And since 320 is more than 0, then max is going to become 320. And then the second time around, it's going to be 274. Max is going to be 320 and current is going to be 274. And since that's max is more than current, then it's not going to run. So it's just going to go through the list and find the biggest number. And you can see here, it finds the biggest number to be 328, which makes sense. It's right there. What did it ask us to do? Okay, inside of the H3, this one, you're going to indicate which one is the longest. So it's going to ask you for, I think it's asking for which index is the longest, right? So we're going to also make this variable called index. And then if the maximum gets overridden, you want to set the index to the current index. So this is basically going to save whenever the max was overridden, which is going to be the maximum paragraph length. And then let's documents.get element by ID longest. So we're going to get the longest H3, not the longest H3, but the element that has the ID of longest, which is this H3. And then you're going to set its inner HTML to the index. And then if we go down here, you can see the index is 3. And then in our console, we could see 0, 1, 2, 3. And it shows the right one. Let's submit this. Okay. Mm, the results paragraph. Okay, I don't. Oh, I think it's asking us to put the paragraph inside of it. What does it say? Yeah. What does it mean by indicate which one of them is the longest? Okay, this is weird. I don't know what it wants us to do. Maybe it's asking us for. Oh, okay, yeah. So notice how index it starts from 0 and then it goes to 4. But it's asking us for the first, second, third, fourth, not the 0th, first, second. So we're just gonna add 1 to the index. So to change it from 0 to 4 into 1 to 5, and then that should let you submit it. Okay, yeah, that was a confusing problem. And then today's homework is just 5.5.